Good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending the Digital Disruption event that we're putting on as part of Advantary. And we have with us today subject matter expert Tim Kapp to talk about digital disruption and how to rethink strategy in a digital first world. So welcome, Tim, and I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce yourself to the attendees and go ahead and get started.
Okay, well, welcome everyone. We have a lot to cover and a very short time to do it. So I want to share, I get so excited about this concept of digital disruption and what's happening in the world and how quickly some of this disruption is taking place. So I'm going to share a lot of information. It's going to be a bit of a fire hose today. At the very end, I'll show my contact information and how you can contact me. So if you want to dive into any particular area that we're talking about today. So let me kick that off quickly. First of all, you're probably wondering who I am. I am a partner at Advantary in San Francisco, and also a partner in a firm called CxOs AI, where we focus on specifically on product development, software development related to AI. I'm also a founding member of the US National AI and Cybersecurity ISAO. The ISAOs were something that President Obama kicked off to help protect the critical infrastructure of the United States. And I sit on the UN chair for AI, their AI for Good Foundation, specifically for the Silicon Valley Foundation. But right now, that is the only one that the UN is supporting in the United States. So I chair that group. I also teach part-time at the University of Utah. Specifically, I teach AI and automation and predictive analytics. And some of the customers I've had, I always get this question. So I certainly don't list all of them, but some you might recognize: GoodRx, Disney, GoDaddy, Intercontinental Hotels, LexisNexis. I've worked with a lot of great, fantastic companies, specifically on AI and automation projects that they're working on. So let's talk about kind of the 5 big questions that I get in different forms, but everything kind of boils down to these 5 questions from most executives that I talk to. And one is, a lot of people don't know what is meant by digital disruption or terms related to that. And so I want to talk about that. I want to talk a little bit about the next question is, what technologies are going to disrupt my industry? So CEOs are very aware. We did a survey at one time, and almost 90% of CEOs are very aware that AI and other disruptive technologies are going to affect their industry. They don't know how, and they don't know which technologies are specifically going to affect their particular industry. Another one is where CEOs tend to get stuck is, how do I go about, once I know what the disruption is going to be, how do I go build a digital disruption strategy? What does that even mean? The next one is, how do I build a team that can enact that strategy? And finally, how do I turn digital capabilities or products, and we'll talk about both of those, into revenue? So I'm going to go through and just follow those 5 questions. I suspect we won't get through all of them, so I'm going to go through as many as I can and answer as many questions as I can in this. But in the process, it's okay if we don't go through them. I've got several frameworks that will help you start framing these questions for yourself. And if we don't get through them, again, I'd be happy to talk to any of you at a later time. So I'm going to frame this with a personal story, and it's not a great story. Let me back up. In 1968, there was a group of some of the best technologists in the world that came together, and they all met near my home in Alta, Utah. And so this is how I found out about this story. So they all flew in, and they decided in 1968 to form the concept of what they called ARPANET. And by December 1969, a year later, the origins of the internet were born. We called it ARPANET at the time, and it had 4 nodes on a network. So an internet of 4, and it included the University of Utah, where I teach, UCLA, the Stanford Research Institute, and UCSB. So fast forward now 23 years, and I found myself just about to graduate from college. And I was working with a company that had incredible technology for the time. Now, this doesn't look so incredible. It's very dated, but at the time we had built a search engine that could search vast quantities of CD-ROMs. But it was made for the legal industry and the finance industry. And so it's an incredible way to search lots of text and get answers to things that you wanted. Underneath that technology, we had something that would take what was called SGML. It's kind of the precursor to HTML. And it would take this technology, or it would format all of the text and code and images and everything in SGML, and then present it in what this window here, which is essentially a browser. Okay, and we were playing around with this technology and had it out with major customers by 1990. And so we were, it's a fast growing business, but it was fairly limited. And then in 1992, Tim Berners-Lee came along with the first web page and hit this concept of the internet. And our company was posed with a browser before there were browsers, long before Netscape, or at least a couple of years before Netscape. And we had the concept of taking text and formatting it into something exactly like HTML, in fact, a little more powerful than HTML. And we had the opportunity, although we didn't see it at the time, to be, a big provider on the internet. And my boss came to me, I was 21 again, and asked this question: will the internet be a fad, or will it redefine the publishing industry? And he asked me to go research this topic because I was the newest graduate from the university. And here's how I looked at it. So I'm an economist. I was trained in economics and finance. And so here's how I looked at it. I said, okay, is there a clear and obvious business model? Is there a sufficient market size or growth rate? And what's the value of the future cash flows that we can predict from launching a new product that would take on this internet? Okay. And remember, at this time, the internet was not commercial. For 23 years, it had essentially been ARPANET, was used in defense, and it was just getting into universities at this point in 1990. And by 92, I think in 91 or 92, we had the first commercial interest in this. So I asked these questions and I said, does it have a clear and obvious business model? Well, absolutely not. There were not that many nodes. No one was making money on the internet in 1992. And so it wasn't clear that anyone had proven that there was a business model. So then I said, was there a market of sufficient size or growth rate? Well, definitely not of sufficient size. Nothing was happening on the internet. Our entire CD-ROM sales absolutely dwarfed anything that was happening on this new internet thing at the time. And so I said, compared to our current business, our current market, absolutely not. And then I said, well, can we predict some future cash flows from this? Well, we didn't even have a business model. And if there's no business model and I can't see a market of sufficient size that's clear and obvious, well, I can't predict cash flows. So, and I'm embarrassed to say this now, I went back to our CEO and said, you should absolutely not distract the company right now and invest in the internet. It's a fad. So I console myself with this because I'm not the only one. Some other very intelligent people said the same thing, and they said it 2 years after I did. So in 1994, Bill Gates said, I see little commercial potential for the internet in the next 10 years. And of course, the next year, he reversed that in his famous internet tidal wave email that he sent internally that says, oops, we made a mistake. Now we're turning the company in all guns on the internet. Same thing with Charles Wang. Put newspapers and magazines out of business. It'll never happen. People say the internet will replace stores. It will never happen. Charles Wang actually has an entire page of quotes that I found about how the internet is never going to do anything useful. And even John Doerr, Kleiner Perkins, one of the most prolific investors. I love this story where he said, he has a quote and he acknowledges this. It said, if everything went just right for Google, he was so excited for Google, but he said, if everything went just perfectly, maybe they could be worth $1 billion one day. And I haven't checked this recently, but they were around 1.9 trillion when I built this slide a few months ago. So substantially larger than even John Doerr thought. So the question is, how do you predict this? I mean, how do we figure out what is going to be the next disruptive wave of technology? How can I, avoid doing exactly what I did, and I correctly identifying what's a good wave, what's something we should be writing, and what's just a distraction? Because heaven knows we have for every internet we have 20 other distractions that we get excited about, we start building on, and then it turns out to be just kind of a dud. So how do you know the difference? And I'm going to talk a little bit today about innovation versus disruption. Innovation, for me, a lot has been written about innovation from authors like Clayton Christensen and others. Innovation is really the act of turning ideas into new products or processes in a new and different way. Every business has to innovate. It's what keeps you relevant. And typically innovation comes from internal sources. So you can reliably create an innovation team. The disruption is different. Disruption prevents businesses from continuing as they usually have. It usually originates externally, and it wipes out. It can completely wipe out slowly evolving companies and redefining industries. So an easier metaphor I like to use is, we've learned that dinosaurs now have feathers. And they went from lizard-like creatures to getting and gaining feathers over time as they slowly migrated into colder environments. Okay, feathers are an innovation. It's something that happens evolutionarily. Disruption is a meteor hitting the earth and wiping out all dinosaurs. Okay, that's the difference between them. So when we talk about disruption, my favorite way to talk about this is through economic productivity. And there's a few reasons we do that. The easiest one of which is, that's how we typically measure value in our society, is through economic productivity. And so and the other thing is economic productivity provides a nice, consistent and objective measure of disruption. So it's not just, Chicken Little and the sky is falling. We can actually measure how disruptive something is. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then I'll define disruptive technology as if we assume that about economic productivity, then disruptive technology then is any technology that brings about a sudden and substantial shift in economic productivity that impacts almost every company and industry. So combining all those concepts into one, that's how I define disruptive technology. It's going to affect everyone, it's going to happen fast, and it's going to be big. So this is my basic formula. Disruption is a function of productivity changes, but also a function of velocity. How fast is it coming on us? And this is how, if you take all of those concepts, this is a simple matrix that I like to think about. So you'll see I put changes in economic productivity on the left side here and speed of adoption on the bottom here. And what I like to do is take any new technology that comes along and place it somewhere on this matrix and see if I can prove to myself that it's actually going to, where something's going to hit. Anything that has low productivity change or low speed of adoption, well, that's definitely going to be just noise and distraction. If something has high speed of adoption but low economic productivity, well, that's going to be a fad. And if it has high economic productivity but low speed of adoption, well, that's what I would call an evolutionary change, more like the innovation that we showed. And right here at the top right, things with high productivity and rapid adoption, those are going to be revolutionary and disruptive. Okay, so this is kind of a matrix to think about when we start going through any technology I talk about. Let me give you some examples here. Actually, I'm going to go through quickly this concept because this will help. So one thing I tried to do is build a framework that said, how can we see where technologies are going to hit? Where is disruption going to traditionally hit? Are there patterns or prototypes that we can evaluate and see, what is going to be big and what isn't? And this is a fun concept. So the Atlantic in 2013 actually asked some of the best scientists in the world. They said, what innovations since the wheel have had the greatest impact on human life? And effectively, they were answering what has had the greatest impact on human productivity. And it was interesting. A bunch of technologies came out, and there was some inconsistency. For the most part, these scientists, top scientists, all agreed on the same 100 or so innovations. And once we went through those innovations, we started categorizing and said, okay, are there patterns here that we can evaluate? What are the patterns, or are the archetypes here that we could evaluate and then apply those archetypes to current technology so we could see, what's going to be big or not. And these are the 8 archetypes that we came up with. The first one is things that improve communication. So the printing press, the invention of paper, the internet, photography, the telephone, the telegraph, radio and television. All of those improve the communication between humans. The next one is things that extended productive life. So nitrogen fixation, the plow, the moldboard plow, the plant breeding, penicillin, vaccinations, anesthesia. And one at the very end, optical lenses, is kind of cool because it doesn't actually add value or extend your life in the sense of making you live longer, but it extends your productive life. So remember, I threw that one in here. Just remember, it's about extending your productive life or making you more productive, not just about extending actual life or length of life. The third one is things that augment the abilities of individuals. And this is obvious: the abacus, semiconductor, the lever, the combine harvester, the cotton gin, things like that fall in that category. And then the fourth category was things that disrupt the physical movement and exchange of goods. So the internal combustion engine, the automobile, the airplane, the railroad, the sailboat, lots of things in that category. Now I'm going to go through these quickly, I know, but we'll reevaluate in a second. Then there were 4 more. Things that make the future more predictable, like agriculture, water reservoirs, dams, insurance was a big one, and batteries. Things that provide shared infrastructure like electricity, irrigation, delivery of clean water, sanitation systems. I would put the internet in that category. Things that allow us to have a shared infrastructure that we can all leverage together. The 7th one is things that supported the Industrial Revolution, so specifically raw materials and processes, and I won't go into that one. But the last one is things that increase our ability to make war. So gunpowder and nuclear fusion are in there. There's a number of other things that would be in there as well. And this is kind of an odd one because war does not increase our productivity, but it can have a major negative impact on productivity, on economic productivity. So I included in there because it was kind of that final category, and it does affect productivity, even if it is in a major negative way. So those are the 8 categories. Oh, sorry. Those are the 8 categories that we came up with, and these patterns occur over and over and over in almost every generation since humanity began. We see the same 8 patterns, and the same major innovations are happening in those. And so this gives us an interesting way to benchmark, how big is an innovation going to be? How many of these patterns does it actually affect? So let me give you an example. I hear a lot of excitement about electric cars, especially in the last 2 years, a lot of investment in electric cars. And we also have this concept of self-driving cars, which today is it's a subcategory of electric cars. Self-driving cars, I think Elon Musk was really the first one that started talking about bringing this to life in the real world. I mean, obviously a number of people have talked about it. Well, let's talk about electric cars. On average today, it's estimated that they save only about 4 cents per gallon. Now that was before gas prices went up this summer, but at the beginning of the summer, this was the estimate from an economist. They actually don't increase your speed or really give you that much time back, okay? You're not going any faster in an electric car. And in fact, if you're going more than 600 miles or so and you have to recharge, you'll probably get there to your location in a slower way. Now, self-driving cars, which today is kind of treated as a subset, they do increase your time for other activities because you're no longer paying attention to the road. If you think about self-driving trucks, they eliminate 20% of trucking fees currently goes to the driver to pay for a driver. And so you can eliminate at least 26% of trucking fees, transportation costs. It has a huge economic impact. So truck driver is the top job in the United States right now. In 23 of 50 states, it's the top job. Overall in the United States, it's the top job as well. So it's going to have a massive economic impact if we put self-driving semi-trucks on the road. So the question is, we're very excited about electric cars right now. There's some talk about self-driving trucks right now, but which one of these is evolutionary and which one is disruptive? And I would argue, some will argue against me, and that's okay, that electric cars are evolutionary. They will have an impact, and I'm really excited about it, if nothing else, for environmental reasons. I think electric cars are fantastic. So don't take what I'm saying the wrong way. But there's no question, if you measure things from the point of view of economic productivity, that the self-driving truck will likely have a far greater economic impact than electric cars by themselves will have. Okay, so that'll just give you an example of how we can evaluate technologies and how I do it today. So why is this important? The issue is that if you want to really build a business quickly, if you want to really build a business that disrupts your competitors, you've got to be able to choose the right wave. In surfing, if you choose the right wave, it increases your probability of catching the wave, it saves arm strength, it pushes you into the right position, and it just decreases the frustration in general. And the same is true of technology waves. If you ride the wave, it increases the right wave, it increases your probability of success, it dramatically saves resources, solidifies your position as a leader because the wave is pushing you, and it has a huge increase in the margin of error that you can have. If you're on the right wave, there's a lot of forgiveness in business. If you're on the wrong wave, there is no forgiveness. And so if you can surf the right wave, the right technology waves, you've got a huge advantage. So let me give you an example. For the past, I don't know, 50 years, insurance has been sold. I've got a picture of a large insurance building here. I won't mention the company, but insurance has been sold in a particular way. And if you'll remember back, all of the insurance commercials featured things like buildings like this because they wanted to show strength and stability and quality. And they featured actors like this because they wanted to feature strength, stability, a low voice that would make sure that you knew you were in good hands. Okay. That's how we sold insurance. It was all about quality. And that's what's been done for years. Along comes one of my favorite companies, Lemon. And they said, well, this is how it's been sold for years, but how could we break into this very competitive insurance industry in an entirely different way? And they said, well, why don't we focus on convenience and speed instead of strength and quality? And so they started using AI and AI-driven chatbots. No one was doing AI at the time. No one was doing chatbots. Even today, there aren't a lot of companies that are doing chatbots well, but Lemon decided they wanted to do it. And they said, we're going to focus everything on convenience and speed. And so as they did that, they did things like, well, they've got chatbots here. Bring up another one here. Oh, sorry. They started doing it so you could apply for your insurance and you could submit claims through chatbots or online or through a simple app. They went from 0 to $3.9 billion valuation in, I believe they were started in 2012. And by 2020, they were at a $3.9 billion valuation. So 8 years to $4 billion. 4 years, I'm sorry. They started in 2016. Recently, they set a world record for 3-second claims, or I shouldn't say recently, 2 years ago, they set a record for 3-second claims. Their first claim solved in 3 seconds or less. Okay, so remember, we used to submit claims, it would take weeks or days, whatever. They're now resolving claims in 3 seconds. That was a world record 2 years ago. Now their average is less than 3 seconds. Okay, that's the average claim settlement process. That's not just submitting a claim. That's submitting your claim from the time you submit the claim to the time it's approved to the time a financial transaction is made that starts the process of putting money into your bank account. So that your bank has been notified within 3 seconds that a transaction or that money is coming. So that's the kind of thing that's disruptive, and they're not the only ones out there. Root Technology did something similar. I think we'll talk about them in a minute, but that's an example of how these technologies are going to hit industries overnight. So let's jump to question 2 now. So now you know how I think about things in an economic point of view. Question 2 is, okay, well, what technologies are out there that are going to be disruptive? I'm going to talk about 4. So I vetted a lot of technologies. There's 4 that I think qualify to be truly disruptive technologies. This doesn't mean there aren't some great technologies out there. For example, I love cloud computing. I use it all day long. And my team focuses on cloud architecture, things like that. But I don't think it has the same kind of disruption that these other 4 technologies are having, will have. So let's go through this. The easiest way to think about a digital technology or digital disruption is to think about a pipeline. So we've got an oil pipeline. And if you think about oil comes out of the ground and gets to you, first of all, you extract it. That's step 1. Step 2 is you transport and store it. I'm sorry, I should have said, well, we'll come back to this. Step 2 is transport and store it. Step 3 is you refine the oil. And step 4 is you consume the oil in a car or a truck or something like that. Well, digital technology is the same. Step 1, the extract, is where we have IoT. That's where we get data from the real world and digitize it. So that could be anything from your heart monitor on your wrist to an agricultural sensor out in the fields. We then transport that and store it. And that could be, typically we store that in some form of a database or something like that. Then we refine the data, and that's where some of the advanced analytics comes along. AI, simple dashboards. That's where we're refining the data. And then we ultimately have to consume the data. And so that comes through some kind of interface. So I'll go back through these. These are the 4 technologies I'm going to put on that digital chain right there. So AI and machine learning, blockchain, artificial AR and VR, virtual reality and augmented reality, and IoT, which stands for Internet of Things. So let's go through each of those quickly and just see what is happening with each one of these. So Internet of Things, there's a lot of things happening with the Internet of Things right now. There's consumer IoT, that would be appliances, voice assistant, light fixtures that you might be familiar with. There's commercial IoT systems, which would be typically healthcare and transport systems. So things like smart pacemakers. I've been working with a company that's building a smart hubcap for transportation. They can monitor the temperature of the wheel from a hubcap and predict if a wheel is going to, or a tire is going to blow before it does, which can save a substantial amount on insurance costs. There's military IoT, wearable, which includes wearable biometrics, things like that. Industrial IoT, which would be digital control systems, smart agriculture, things of that nature. And then infrastructure IoT for just monitoring, things like smart cities or stoplights or, crime monitoring, things like that. Okay, so lots of things, but basically all of these technologies are taking the real world and digitizing it so that it can be then analyzed. They digitize it so we can create a digital twin that we can then model and analyze and act on. And so again, here's the same pipeline. We extract the data with IoT, we transport it, we refine it and consume it. And that's where IoT fits in. So let me show you some examples. IoT, here's a customer of mine that is working on a farm equipment IoT device that monitors everything happening in the farm equipment. It monitors the loads. It monitors where all the trucks are on the farm, where all the devices are, even where the big tools are. Anything that's large enough to stick a digital sticker on, they're monitoring. So they can, at any time, they can see where all of the equipment is, how it's being used, how productive it is, and how worn out it is. Whether it needs to be replaced soon and they should be maintaining it. Here's one I use. Okay, now this is the interface to it, but every day I get on my bike. I used to ride out in the mountains, or at least in the summer I ride in the mountains. In the winter, I can't. It's too cold. So I get on my bike and I have a watch that monitors my heart. I have a bike that's hooked up to the internet that monitors my speed and my breath, and it can even give me the feedback. It can make it feel like I'm riding on a pebble road. So lots of really cool stuff. And every day I get on with 20 other people and I run a race on my bike. All of that input is IoT, and so these devices surround us. There's an incredible forecast, and we'll probably share these slides, so I won't stop on these, but as you can see, there's been a hockey stick in the last couple of years, and it's just growing incredibly quickly. With 5G, it's going to just grow faster. So again, going back to our 8 archetypes, this is how I would evaluate IoT. Does it improve communication? Yes, I use it all the time for communication. Does it extend my productive life? Well, I don't use it for heart monitoring, but there are people that do. There are now medical devices. Well, I'll give you an example. If you've all probably recently seen the continuous blood glucose monitors that you tap into your arm. That's a good example of how IoT is extending human life. Does it augment abilities as individuals? Absolutely. I can do things like race on my bike. I can do virtual races, or that's a fun example, so I'm not sure that shows economic productivity, but there are examples of that. Does it disrupt the physical movement of goods? Absolutely. We are putting IoT devices all over every train that goes out, car. We're putting them all over our cars, all kinds of stuff that's disrupting out there. Does it make the future more predictable? Yes. Gathering information about crops or deforestation or things like that all makes the future more predictable. And does it provide or facilitate shared infrastructure? Again, yes. You saw all of those different places where we can coordinate activities better once we digitize them. Does it support the industrial revolution or processes? That one I don't know. And we haven't gone into the detailed definition, but I put a question mark on that. And finally, does it increase our ability to wage war? Absolutely. The military is absolutely using IoT devices everywhere recently. And you're seeing in the war in Ukraine, you're seeing big differences between armies that know how to use this well and those that don't. Okay, so that's technology number 1. And I'm going to move very quickly through this so we can get to the couple more interesting parts. IoT is a big one. It's definitely going to be disruptive. Blockchain is another big one. Blockchain, again, I won't go through it, but blockchain it's a simple concept. It's in its simplest form, it's a form of data storage. Okay, but unlike other forms of data storage, it has some interesting characteristics where there's an irreversible order to the data. So they call these blocks, and blocks always stay in order. So we've got the green, blue, and red block here. They always stay in order. There's decentralized control of these databases. So every other database in the world has centralized control. I can control it as the company, but with decentralized control, an entire community of people can look at it and confirm and say, yes, we're in control of this, and nothing has changed. It's public, it's redundant, it's immutable, it has encrypted data, and it's all anonymous. So transactions can, if we want, occur anonymously. And it's very transparent. So all it is a very unique form of data storage, but that unique form renders it with all of these capabilities that are not true of every other form of data storage. Blockchain fits in the second step of our data transformation. It fits in the transport and store. So it's the same step as traditional databases have fit. We all know blockchain best because of those unique characteristics, it enabled cryptocurrencies. And so cryptocurrency is the first use of blockchain that we're all very familiar with. And I won't go into that. I assume everyone's familiar with Bitcoin and Ethereum and those kinds of things. And it's just that unique structure that enabled it. But there are some other uses. So for example, tracking food chains. Tracking I'll give you a great example. Olive oil is one of the most corrupt industries in the world, and it's because you can cut olive oil with other kinds of oils. It's very difficult to see or detect. Okay, and so I think someone did an analysis, and almost 90% of olive oils are cut at some point in the chain. But using blockchain technology, you can actually track it and confirm that you actually have real olive oil. And so that's something that's being enabled. But any kind of food chain can be, if you have salmonella that gets introduced to the spinach upstream, we can have an exact chain of custody of where that spinach came from, and know exactly, not just, we don't have to shut down the entire spinach industry anymore. We can say, okay, we're going to track it right back to the specific farm and probably the specific load that caused the problem. Solve that now instead of shutting down an entire industry. So that has huge economic impact. Some of the other uses for it are financial exchanges, money transfer, smart contracts, real estate, artist royalties is a big one. And so these kinds of things are going to be really big and useful. Now let's put it on the same categorization. Does it improve communication? Yes, it can. It improves our ability to recreate accurate communication. So we have increased accuracy with how we share data. Does it extend our productive life? I don't know. I couldn't find a reason for that. Does it augment our ability as individuals? Not sure it does that. Does it disrupt the physical movement of goods and people? Absolutely. We can track goods. We are also tracking people. One of my favorite uses of blockchain technology right now is we're seeing immigrants, especially from Syria, as they're moving through Europe. There's huge cases of being separated from children, being separated from the groups they're with. And so one of my favorite organizations is using blockchain to track Syrian children, so that as new people get into come into the different camps, they can identify where those children are, who they are, and bring families back together. So absolutely love that organization, but lots of different things happening with blockchain, but it absolutely disrupts the physical movement of goods and people. It does make the future more predictable. It does provide and facilitate a shared infrastructure, is the ultimate shared data infrastructure, if you will, because we can open this stuff up publicly, but still keep certain things anonymous. And then the last two categories, I don't know if blockchain helps us wage war. I'm sure there's some applications to war, but I don't know if it's a huge disruption there. So blockchain is one of those that I think we'll see some cool applications. I don't think it's as big as some of these others, but we'll see some really interesting applications. And then my last one, and this is the one that's dear to my heart, is artificial intelligence and machine learning. And I'm sorry, second to last one, artificial intelligence and machine learning. I'm going to skip a few slides here, but let me just jump into what it does. I was going to show you an example of how this fits in artificial intelligence in the form of a plane going from France to the US. But let me go through that very quickly, and then we'll try to go through this fast. Just to show you kind of how all this fits together. Imagine a plane leaving 45 minutes late from Paris to New York. And these are the questions you would ask yourself is, okay, how do we collect data to even know that? Well, the airplane broadcasts a signal, which is a form of IoT. How do we manage the data? Well, we then put it in a database. What happens then what happened? Okay, well, if we want to know what happened in the airline or when it's going to be here, we look at a dashboard, which is what those flight screens are that you see in the airport. And then we want to ask what will happen? Well, that's when we bring in AI and machine learning, and we start asking questions about what's going to happen, how the weather pattern is going to affect this, how is being 45 minutes late going to affect this, can the pilot increase the speed? Then you ask yourself, what's the best course of action? So now that we know it's going to be late, what do we do about it? Should we send resources to a different gate? Should we reassign it to a different gate? Should we assign an extra agent to the terminal to help people quickly reschedule their flights? Then we ask the question, how it happens. And I'll go through this quickly, but why it happened, then we can look at causal analysis and things like that. And we can explore ways of improving the whole game of flying. How do we go about improving how we organize our flights? And we might even want some fake data to simulate those kinds of things. So those are the kinds of questions we always ask as data scientists. A simpler way to look at it is this. If you want to ask these questions, descriptive analytics answers the question, what happened? Okay, that's where we take data and describe it. Diagnostic analytics answers the question, why something happened. Predictive analytics answers the question, well, what will happen? What do we expect to happen next? And prescriptive analytics answers the question, well, what's our best course of action? Once we know what's going to happen next, what can we do to change our stars? And then finally, this is traditional AI and machine learning, by the way, those three. But there is a new form of AI and machine learning, which is, we call it generative analytics. This says, what if we reverse this entire process? What if we reversed, instead of analyzing data and creating a predictive model, what if we had a model and then we started inventing data from that model? Okay, so it's a complete reversal. And these are some of the most exciting technologies out there right now. I'll show you those in just a second. So AI and machine learning, this is some of the stuff we're doing now. Weather prediction's been around forever, fraud detection, recommendation engines for everything from Netflix to Amazon, personal assistance, news and ad writing. A lot of people don't realize that most sports news now, and increasingly a number of other kinds of articles, is actually written by an AI. Most articles now in large organizations are first written by an AI and then edited by a human. So for example, MSNBC just laid off 800 writers because they said, we could do this more efficiently with a few writers and AI writing the initial article. Here's some examples of ads being written. I use this all the time for ads now. I give it a prompt. I say something like this: write a creative ad for the following product to run on Facebook aimed at parents. And my product is a learning room. I give it a description. The learning room is a virtual environment to help students from kindergarten to high school excel in school. So I'll give it a prompt like that, and out will come out several. This is a particular product, but out will come out a nicely written ad. That was all done by an AI. I have a company now that is asking me to create a fully automated ad creation software so that when it gets cold in Chicago, 6 days before it being cold, they make heated coats. So they want 6 days before it gets cold, because that's about how long it takes to ship a heated coat. They want to know if there's a major temperature change in Chicago. They want an ad to be automatically written that says it's about to get really cold in Chicago on Thursday. If you order now, we can have heated gloves or a heated jacket to you by Thursday. Okay, that's the kind of stuff we're doing. So we don't even have time for humans to edit these ads. We've got to write an AI that completely automates and generates these ads, and it will write hundreds of these a day for every one of their 50 products and for every major city in the nation. So that's the kind of stuff we're doing. We're writing code now. So we have AI that is effectively writing code currently it's on par with an average developer, not a great developer, but it just beat an average developer score on a major testing network. Here's some of the generative AI I was talking about. These are fun ones. I'm sure you've seen these on the internet. These are AIs that took a cartoon or statue of people and created what it thought the real life version of those individuals might look like. So kind of fun. This AI just won first prize at a county fair in Denver for this painting, entirely conceived and painted by an AI. And it just won first prize against a bunch of humans. So the generative stuff is absolutely incredible. I've got, artists I've seen writing music with AI, generating things. So some incredible stuff that's happening right now. So how disruptive is it? Well, with more data and with more computing power, it's just going to get more and more disruptive. I believe AI over the next 3 years will be the single most disruptive technology it fills every one of these categories, and it meets those categories in incredible ways. And we're just starting to understand some of those categories, including, and maybe even one of the biggest ones, the ability to wage war. We had the first, I think, 2 years ago, year and a half ago, we had an Israeli drone that was the first drone to autonomously identify and without permission, intentionally identify and take out a particular target. Now we're seeing massive inputs into AI and the area of war. Okay, so I'm going to go. Let's jump ahead a little bit here. Okay, virtual reality is one that I wish we had more time to talk about. I believe it's going to be big. Again, not maybe as big as some of the others, but I do believe it has certain characteristics that make it pretty big. So let's talk about building a digital strategy. I will do this very quickly, and then we'll answer a few questions here. So again, to recap, disruptive technology is any technology that brings about a sudden and substantial shift in economic productivity. And so what you're trying to do is figure out, how can I use these technologies with your company to give you some leverage? How do I get more? How do I use it to help me act like I have more money, act like I have more customers, do more with the people I have, whatever it might be. And the idea, what I like to think of these as, these technologies give you the ability to leverage, to create leverage. So if you have fewer resources than other companies, these disruptive periods give you this incredible ability to upgrade your resources and do some digital judo, if you will, and take advantage of something that's not entirely in control. If you're the first one to adopt these technologies or use them correctly, you can absolutely disrupt substantially larger opponents or competitors. And we see it every time these new technologies come out. Very few of the initial companies are left over after some of these hit. So in a traditional view of strategy, you're building on the company's strengths, building on the people, the funding, and the resources that you have, and you're trying to match the competition. The way to think about digital technologies is, don't think about matching the competition. You never, ever want to match strength against strength. What you want to do is use these forces and take advantage of them, but forces other than strength and size, in order to beat the competition. So you want to think of these technologies as a giant wave, and you're trying to figure out how to ride that wave, because that wave is what gives you the power. It's not your resources that do. It's the wave, and that all of the disruption and power behind AI or IoT that is going to give you the power, not what you get internally. Perfect example of this is the Oakland A's. I'm sure you've seen this story of Billy Beane. It's made famous in the book and the movie Moneyball. It was a simple idea. He started analyzing data, or not he, but his people analyzed the data, and they found that on-base percentage had a near perfect correlation with wins over time, the team winning percentage. So he focused all his recruiting efforts around finding players that got him better on-base percentage, and he pretty much threw away every other traditional recruiting tactic. And this is what they looked like. In the 2002, the Oakland A's salary was third from the bottom. You see Yankees up there at the top. This is their performance relative to payroll. Okay, so this is what you would calculate as ROI. Effectively, the ROI was substantially higher than any of the other teams. They set one of the records for the most wins in a given season, the most straight wins. I'm sure you've seen the movie, but it was incredible what a simple thing like that model there was. A simple it was a simple linear regression model. It's the kind of thing I teach my students how to do in the first week of class today. But it was a discovery they found, and it gave them substantial leverage over the entire industry. They still don't pay highest salaries, and they're not always at the top, but they're usually near the top in their division. But for the money they pay, absolutely, they have the highest ROI by far, nearly double what the next highest one is, as you can see there. So that's what you want to do. Again, it's all about choosing the right wave and figuring out which wave to ride. I think what I want to do is end there. So let me show you where we were going. Yeah, let's talk about one more concept quickly and then we'll end. And that is, okay, what does this all mean? How do you apply it to strategy? Strategy for me is this framework for decision making. And so I've come up with a simple methodology that I like for decision making. And it's this simple. This is what I walk every one of my clients through. And I say, first of all, you have to differentiate. So forget technology. How's your company different? What are you going to do that is different than everyone else? And there really are only six answers to that. Is you're either going to be lower cost than everyone else, higher quality, you're going to be more convenient or faster, you're going to provide better service, you're going to out innovate them, or you're going to build what I call a better network. And that's a specific kind of company, usually relates to things like social media or things where there's a network effect. So that's kind of an obscure one, but you can quickly, and again, we'll share these slides, but quickly decide, how are you going to differentiate? So whatever differentiation you have, I can almost guarantee it falls into one of those 6 categories. So figure out first how you're going to differentiate. Then the next question is, how are you going to grow? And there's 5 ways to grow. You can be a product, which means if you're a product, then your next product looks an awful lot like your previous product. So you're continuing a line of products. A good example of that is Apple or Kellogg. Kellogg, makes a lot of cereals. You could be customer or market focused, and that is, companies that focus specifically on a particular kind of customer. So someone like Trader Joe's or Disney, they're very focused on a particular kind of customer, and then they provide as many different products as they can to that customer. So think of your experience with Disney, for example. Disney will sell all kinds of different movies. They will sell all kinds of different products. If you love Little Mermaid, there's 40 different products you can buy around Little Mermaid. But they all serve families, okay? Then there's technology companies, and these aren't what we think of as technology. They're inputs into other things. And so NVIDIA and DuPont, but they're inputs into someone else's product. These people are really good at finding a technology and finding as many homes as possible for it. And then there's production capacity, which is businesses that have incredibly high fixed costs. And so their economic incentive is to just keep the lights on, keep that machine running as long as it can, as fast as it can, without downtime, because that's how they get the highest payback. And then distribution companies like Walmart and Amazon have figured out that distribution, getting things to the right place the fastest, the right things to the right place quickly is the best strategy. So when I walk companies through this, and this is something I'd be more than happy to walk people through, I then combine these two, your differentiation and your growth strategy, and you figure out what box you're in. And you ask yourself, where would your customers place you to? So where do you want to be? Where are your competitors and partners? And then within that, and this is the big key, within that box, this single box here in the middle, you ask yourself, what are the 2 to 3 capabilities or processes that we need to be world-class at? If you'll remember, Lemonade Insurance right here at the top said, we need to be world-class at convenience and speed, and they offer insurance, and that's all they do is insurance. So it's a single product. So they said, we're going to do world-class delivery of insurance with convenience and speed. And so they focused on 2 capabilities. How fast can we sign someone up, and how simply can we sign them up through an app, and how fast and simply can we produce a claim? That's all they did. 2 processes that differentiated that entire company from their competitors. And it took them from 16 billion, or from 0 to 4 billion in a matter of minutes, or a matter of years, 4 years. Okay, that's what you're looking for, is to figure out what very few capabilities you need. That's what we call your differentiating work. That's the work you need to be world-class at. Then, and only then, do you look at these technologies and figure out, well, what technologies, what disruptive technologies will actually support that differentiating work? So what I'm suggesting here is you need to start with strategy first, figure out your strategy, and then once you know your strategy, then look at the technologies and figure out, and not every technology will fit the particular process that you need to be world-class at. Everyone gets so excited about these technologies. I get excited about the technologies, but the right way to use this with strategy in business is start with your strategy, figure out differentiation, figure out your growth strategy, then prioritize your work, figure out what's going to differentiate, what 2 or 3 processes are going to differentiate you in the box that you chose, and then apply technology just to that. So there's a lot more here that I love to share with people. And I'll just leave you with this because we don't have much time for questions. So I'll leave you with this. This is how you go about using the technologies to build a company that can truly disrupt your industry. Don't start with the technology. They're super exciting, and I love the technologies and how do we evaluate them. And you should be very aware of what technologies are coming down the pipe in order to figure out what wave you're going to ride. But the step one is start with your strategy. Begin to, once you have that strategy, identify your work, identify what makes you unique and different, then figure out how technology can support 2 or maybe 3 of the most fundamental processes in your organization, and then go from there. So I'm going to I'll skip a few slides here right to the end. I would love, there's a lot more I'd love to share here. Can you still see that? You still see my screen?
No.
No. Not anymore.
Okay, here we go. Okay, if you would like to reach me, this is how you can find me. You can email me at tim@advantary.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I would love talking to any of you about these particular technologies and how to develop and build your strategy, and even how to build a team. That's something we didn't get to, but there's a very unique way of building a technology-based team and running a team like that. And it's very different than how you build a team for a traditional company. So if you want to reach out, there's a few reasons to reach out to me. I would love to talk digital strategy. If your company meets the criteria for the AI for Good Foundation, like I said, I'm on the board of that. We are taking pitches right now for anyone doing good in the world using AI or things. If you're thinking about AI or doing something that meets one of the UN's 17 sustainable development goals, I would love to hear from you, and I can show you how maybe you can get into this pitch contest, get some money from that. And again, I also work with Advantary and CxO and specifically focus on helping people build teams. We support teams by bringing specialized AI and data resources that a lot of teams can't afford or shouldn't afford at certain stages. We can bring and surround your team with the right capabilities, get them trained up as you implement this and implement your own AI or machine learning strategies. So again, I would love to talk more about this and specifically about strategy for anyone that would like to contact me. I will stay on for questions, but I think we're going to end this right now. That's the end of my presentation. I'll stick around for any questions anyone has, but otherwise, it was great to talk to you today, and I hope to hear from you.
Thank you very much, Tim. That was a fantastic presentation. Do any of the attendees have some questions? If yes, just take yourself off mute and feel free to ask the question. Right. Sounds like you did a great job, Tim.
I have a question.
Oh, Jared did post one in the chat. Do you see that, Tim, in the chat?
I don't have the chat. Can you share that question with me?
It says, why aren't EVs fundamentally disruptive technology? Tesla is working on one that lasts 1 million miles. Dealers make most of their money on service, which will no longer be needed.
So those are excellent points, and I don't want to say I'm the expert in electric technology or electric cars. So you're absolutely right on the service side. Well, you may be right. So I've actually, my brother services these cars, and he said the same thing. He's asked me the same question. The truth is, they do make their service that way, but you still have to service electric cars. And so you still have to have tires for electric cars. You still have to service engines. They may be less service, but there's not today. It's going to be an evolutionary process in the sense that it'll slowly get to be less service, but it's not going to be overnight. Electric cars today are not serviced substantially less than gasoline powered cars are, as far as I know. They might be serviced somewhat less, but for the most part, think about the things you pay for, tires, whatever it might be. They are still serviced quite a bit. I hope that changes over time. They are simpler. The mechanics of them are simpler, and so I do think it will change over time. But so I'm not saying it wouldn't happen. I just think it's more evolutionary than disruptive, because it's not going to be here in 3 years. We won't have completely replaced the service component of that. Nor will we have a car that goes 1 million miles within 3 years. It's happening slowly, and that the speed of that makes a big difference. When something happens slowly, we can adapt to it. Existing industries can adapt. So you see, I've been looking at buying an electric car recently, and we're seeing similar performance from other cars manufacturers as Tesla has had. And so you don't see as big a dropout, or the existing industries aren't as replaced as quickly with an evolutionary technology versus a truly disruptive. That's my opinion. I could be wrong, but we'll know in 3 years. We don't have to wait 20 years to know. If it was disruptive, then companies like Ford and all the other ones will be gone in 3 years. If it's evolutionary, they'll be around for a while.
Thank you, Tim. Does anyone else have any questions?
Ganesh, did you have one?
Yeah. I think my question was more related to what is the functional view of this? So obviously, most companies have these functions, whether it's finance, sales, supply chain, right? So in terms of these disruptive technologies, for instance, how does it impact like a sales function, for instance? Right. So how should we be thinking about it?
There's two ways to think about this. The first way is, it is a brilliant question, because the first way is one of the biggest problems we have with AI and machine learning and all of these technologies is they don't fit in a specific function clearly. Because they're mostly infrastructure functions. I'll give you an example. My specialty is customer churn. And so I'll go talk to companies about churn. Well, ask yourself, who owns customer churn in an organization? Is it sales? The salespeople all tell me no. The person that owns it is downstream from me. If I go to support, they say, oh, that person must be upstream from me. If I go to the CFO, they say, well, that's not my issue. Customers are a sales or marketing function. And marketing's, I have been to a lot of big organizations, some very large organization, and most of them say they don't really know who owns churn. And to solve a churn problem, that's a fantastic AI and machine learning problem. But there is no clear identifier within the organization. IT doesn't own churn either. Yeah. And so there is no clear bucket to put this stuff in. And that's been one of the big failures, is you have to coordinate teams to figure out what the whole thing is. That's why, like, another reason I start with strategy, because if the team doesn't understand the strategy and it's an individual group trying to solve a problem, it rarely happens. Data is a supporting function that crosses every team. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
yeah, no, I was looking for more specifics in terms of any technologies or any best practices that you've seen in certain functions that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'll tell you a few. I just mentioned one. The fastest way I've seen to make money for a new company or for an existing company is dealing with customer churn. That is almost instant revenue. So we've taken companies, we took a call center and that was losing $500,000 a month and got them profitable within 90 days by simply applying machine learning to a customer churn problem. Advertising is the next one. So I've worked with several companies. I worked with M1 in Singapore, one of their big mobile providers, to take the data they had and do customized advertising so that they spent a third less on advertising than they were previously, because we could target it to just the customers that were most ripe to receive a particular message. Now we're using it on the other side with advertising to say, well, instead of customizing our ad, or instead of giving the right ad to the right people, let's find the right people and have an AI write the ad specific to that person.
Right.
So some great stuff, but anywhere in the, we call it the RevOps chain, or revenue operations, anywhere in revenue operations, those are high value targets in almost any organization.
Absolutely. Makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Tim, and everyone else who stayed on after for the Q&A. Greatly appreciate it. We will be making this recording available to everyone at another time, and I'll be sure to email you when it's available. And Tim's contact information is on the screen, so please feel free to reach out to him anytime. And that's it. Thank you so much, everyone. We greatly appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.